Well, hello, everybody. I'm Emi Bague, one of the assistant directors over at the Career Development Center, and I'm talking to Frankie Frain today over at IT. And this video is actually about Future Ready, the Career Development Center's series on professional development. And we have some skills that, that we want to focus on during the series, and those are career development, communication, critical thinking, equity and inclusion, leadership, professionalism, teamwork, and technology. So we're going to focus on technology for this topic today. So I want to turn it over to Frankie just to introduce himself, and then we'll just jump into conversation about technology and professional development.
Yes, I'm the Director of Information Security and IT Infrastructure in the college's IT department. And I was a VMA major. I was a BA, and then I also got my MFA at Emerson as well. So I'm a two-time filmmaker major at Emerson. And so you might say, well, then how did you fall into information security? And it's also Emerson's fault. I went to the Welcome Center in 2004 for the job fair, and my parents said, well, filmmaking, technology, they're similar enough. Why don't you sign up for a student help desk job? I said, I don't think I know how to help people with their computers, though. I don't think I could set up Outlook or help somebody with an Excel problem. And they said, you'll figure it out. It's the thing that pays right now. I did it, and I was horrified for my first 2 weeks. I remember the phone would ring off. If you've ever called the IT help desk before with a confusing problem or something, I was the student on the other end going like, I've not heard of that before. But like all things in life, you start to map the environment and understand what's important to people, what's not important to people. You start to do the same thing twice, and you develop a little bit of mastery. And so I went to Los Angeles for the LA internship program, and Los Angeles wasn't for me. And I thought, well, I'd really like to start a career, and maybe there was somebody that I was serious with who became my wife. I said, Boston's really for me. I wonder if there's any jobs for me back in Boston. And I called the help desk, and I said, you got anything for me? And they gave me a temp job for the summer. And that turned into a full-time job in the labs, which is another unique field where you're managing, several hundred computers with lots of specialty software, specialty hardware. Got good at that, fell into IP networking. So then I started working a little bit with the IP networking people, and they said, you should come work for us. And I said, you don't want me to do that. I don't know how your technology works. I don't know anything about this. I'm just a filmmaker. I'm just here for the money. But they hired me and to help manage the data center, and I got mentored under smart people there. And then 2 or 3 years later, because I had some communication competencies, probably from soft skills from Emerson and from being a storyteller, they said, would you like to be a manager? I said, yes, but I don't know how to be a manager. So it eventually turned into IT security, which is where I am now, which is a booming industry. Obviously, if you've ever been on LinkedIn and want to look at opportunities for security professionals, there's an awful lot of data security concerns, privacy concerns, confidentiality concerns. Every company has them. Every company is conducting all of their business online. And so you need good security professionals. And in my case, I had also this sort of IT tech background. Is not all security professionals are technicians. Some of them are risk managers, or they're in the finance sector maybe, and they fall into information security. And then they know security and they know the law, but then they have to learn IT. This is something that I want to talk about today that was not obvious to me when I was a student at Emerson, which was tech is not a monolithic career field. There's a wide variety of types of professions that you can have in the tech industry, from project manager to, of course, leadership, to IP networking and server administration, to database administrator, of course, coding. But then there's web development, and then there's backend development. So if you like designing systems, that's more backend development. If you like designing user interfaces or user experiences, that's more front end. There's, of course, content management, where you don't need to know the actual coding. You're really just a content manager. One of the things that really was an awakening for me was I met this brilliant networking administrator, somebody who can manage an enterprise network of millions of people, right, and keep it resilient and keep it up and running and keep everything secure. And he didn't really know how to connect a Bluetooth keyboard. He never really went through something like that before.
Okay.
So the help desk, a help desk student had to come and help him with that. But
Mhm.
in other words, this sort of the client technology, the I'm not very good with computers is totally distinct from what he does, even though what he does is deeply technical. You see that all over the tech industry, really. Like
Right.
developers frequently are not necessarily good with media applications, obviously. Uh,
Right.
so there's a variety of things to do.
So you mentioned earlier being a VMA major, and
Mm.
I'm thinking about the VMA students who would tune into this and wonder how they would develop technology proficiencies, or like what should they focus on that makes them well-rounded, not only the technologies within their own fields, but technologies that are sort of across the board that any major would benefit from developing. What should they prioritize, whether VMA major or otherwise?
Well, so VMA majors, I think, are maybe journalism as well. Any major that's interacting regularly with media technologies,
Mhm.
I think, has an advantage in breaking into technology, a technology field in general, because
Yeah.
all the principles are there. So if you're working with a camera and you have to understand which codec you're shooting on, because that's going to impact the storage that you store on, and it's going to impact whether or not it can perform on the network, right? So
Mhm.
it's frequently the case that like a broadcasting person would need to know some of those details just to be proficient in their job. I mean, that would literally be part of their job. But I remember when I was a VMA major, one of the areas that I overlapped with more traditional tech was storage. Because nothing is more storage intensive than video.
Right.
That was the first time I got to learn about network storage. So when private cloud or maintaining your own disk in your own data center, how do you secure that?
Mhm.
How do you manage its usage? How do you manage quotas and that sort of thing? What protocols on different clients can connect to it?
Mhm.
So I guess my advice would be, don't gloss over the tech. Don't say, I'm just going to try, I have an assignment or I've got this project I got to get through, and I'm just going to kind of try to brute force my way through the tech. I'm just going to try to, the important thing to me is the art. Well, of course the art is
Mhm.
paramount, and the storytelling is paramount. Knowing the tools at your disposal are going to make you powerful in your future career on that project. You're going to be asked to help on other projects because these
Right.
are complex technologies.
How would you say technology has evolved since your time at Emerson until now, just in your own in the your tech in your field, your own job, or within the context of any given major of Emerson?
Well, in 2004, when I started at Emerson, there were still media and traditional IT, as it's kind of understood, were still fairly distinct. I mean, you see it in the curriculum, and of course, you still see it in the curriculum to some extent, which is, you're literally shooting on a mechanical camera, right? So there's no electronic component to a Bolex, for instance.
Mhm.
The Bolex camera is what Film 1 students shoot on. So literally loading film and using a crank and processing it with light. So at no point does it touch the internet, or does but of course, naturally, you end up archiving it and you end up distributing it on the internet. So predictably, over the most obvious thing that's changed over the last 20 years or so is a convergence onto IP technologies, internet protocol technologies. So whether it's to deliver video or to distribute video, or to communicate from one broadcast studio to another, it's all converged on IP technologies. And so what does that mean? It means that people who used to have specialties in proprietary or specialty delivery technologies now, all, for instance, right now, MTP is hiring a new engineering person, and they need to have, they need to be pretty proficient in network administration, despite the fact that they don't have a network administrator job. So
Right.
10 years ago, that would have been unheard of. So converging on one technology is good in the sense that it's clear what skills that you require. Of course, it makes it more difficult because it means that if you run a company's IP network, if it goes down or it's not resilient, then now many more things than just people's internet access goes down. Their phones go down, their storage goes down, their potentially their cameras go down. And the same would go for if that IP network was not secure. So if there was unauthorized access on it or something like that. So you put all your eggs in one basket, you got to make a good basket. So it means that everybody has to be skilled in at least the fundamentals of information security and in IP delivery mechanisms.
Sounds like there's some universal things that anyone needs to know if they're going to go out there, and look for work, basically.
Yeah.
It's sort of like foundational, the security aspect. And it kind of leads me to this next question about tech savviness. Like every student graduating from Emerson is going to look at job descriptions pretty much, unless they're freelancers and they want to do independent things. But if they're going to enter a workforce or a company, and they're going to look at job descriptions, often they're going to be required to have some level of technology proficiency. So what do you say sort of a baseline for all students to be developing now so that they're equipped for being tech savvy in whatever field they pursue? Like, what does that mean even on a customer service level or a collaboration level? Because they will be working among teams. Like, what does that mean?
Well, I think you're spot on. It's a tech-led world. So regardless of what you're doing, if you're administrative, if you're human resources, if you're sales, technology is how you do your job. If you're remote, certainly that's obvious. But the vast majority of tasks, I think, for most jobs at this point is information sharing, is information exchange. And we do information exchange through tech, through messaging platforms, through video conferencing, by collaborating on documents together, and collaborating on documentation. I would highlight the characteristics that make somebody adaptable in that environment. Adaptability probably being the chief characteristic. So to relate it back to my experience at Emerson, I would say one thing I would compliment Emerson on is I've always found it to be fairly change resilient, which is necessary for a cutting edge school that has exciting curricula the way we do. Like any organization, it sometimes has been difficult to say, hey, we want to standardize on a new email platform, or we want to standardize on a new personnel platform or something like that. And it's a big boat to steer. There's a lot of people that are impacted. And a lot of those people may have become extremely comfortable with their old processes. And as long as those processes were reliable for them, then they knew that they could do their job well. And changing that on them is extremely disruptive. So we always had to change manage. It's called change management when you undertake something like that. We always had to change manage fairly carefully. And I think we always will. That's the hallmark of good communication and a good IT department, is that you're sympathetic to those changes. But if your organization is not change resilient, then it's going to incentivize everybody to not change.
Right.
You're going to have a cascading effect where you're not adapting fast enough. So COVID in particular, we start, the whole world had to run online in like a week or something. And I would say since then, we've been announcing and major changes or new technologies on a weekly and monthly basis ever since. And I found that the organization, like Emerson, has become even that much more adaptable to everything, sort of out of necessity. Where 10 years ago, you could expect that maybe 30% of the workforce was going to, you're going to have to do a lot of hand holding and a lot of convincing. And now it's sort of like there's an acceptance that, yeah, this thing is moving, and we've got to move with it, or we're not going to, we're just not going to be functional, frankly. So it's important that every individual that at a workplace, I would, in the IT department, adaptability and flexibility is one of our core values. But I imagine that adaptability is a core value of a lot of organizations and a lot of departments for that very reason. You just can't afford a lot of lag. I think that because we communicate through tech platforms as often as we do, tech proficiency, that is to say, using technology is a bit second nature. You don't have to be so deliberate with every keystroke. You're not kind of relearning your computer environment every time you use it. It's sort of like language. It's, in the same way that it's difficult to think without the right words, it's difficult to communicate without the right technology proficiency.
Exactly. Yes.
Much like earlier when I said, don't, if you're doing a VMA project, don't just brute force your way through the tech part because it's the complex or that's the difficult part. Much the same way, I would say, set up your processes to be efficient and to make sense, and bookmark what you need to bookmark and forward what you need to forward. And if you use your inbox like a task list, keep that limited. Stay on top of your tech. Don't, tune your notifications so they actually are meaningful to you. it sounds silly, but if you have never taken a typing class, I recommend, and you really struggle with typing, or now you can't have a free-flowing real-time conversation with somebody because you're struggling with typing, I would recommend a typing class. In all of those ways, it really doesn't matter the field. You don't have to be going into IT for what I'm saying to make sense.
Right. There's some universals for sure. I was even thinking as you were speaking about how technology is involved in, in career development. It's its own industry. Higher ed is its own industry in a way. And when I go about my day-to-day life, it's so much better to know the technologies that support the work that I do, so that I can communicate well with any person I'm collaborating with. And if something shuts down, a person with some technology foundation can take over for someone who, may have lost connection to Zoom, like whoever's like managing that part of a meeting, for example, or some sort of collaborative project, and we're all meeting online. If someone can't connect, someone else has to take over.
It's not somebody else's job. Yes, there's IT support, but everybody is supporting and using the technology. So
exactly,
it would be better not to think of it as I don't really do tech. It's something that I wanted to mention that comes up all the time. When new people are brought into, whether it's campus life or institutional advancement, or we call them the sort of the business departments on campus. It's frequently the case that department has a goal, strategic goal of some kind, an initiative that they want to accomplish, and they want to improve enrollment, or they want to bring in donations or something like that. The likelihood that they're going to have to adopt some kind of technology system to accomplish that goal is extremely high. It's like close to 100% probably.
Mm-hmm.
And that often comes in the form of, hey, new professional in that department, can you go research new workflows for us or new applications that we might be able to use? So we have non-IT people bring us applications that their department wants to use all the time.
Yep.
And being able to actually vet the requirements, communicate the requirements to a vendor, let's say, communicate the requirements to an IT department that ensures that it's secure and ensures that it integrates with the rest of the school. Being conscientious enough to know, hey, I don't want to duplicate efforts. I don't want to cause inefficiency in my organization. So I'm going to look for, first, I'm going to do my research and understand whether or not there are other applications that already suit this need before I just have a redundant one. And, so I'm going to foster communication, to solve that problem too. The point being, I consider that a high level technology task. That's not, just make sure that your computer environment works well for you. That's like, you've been tasked with finding an enterprise application for the institution to use. And the likelihood that our graduating students are going to have a task like that in a future job, very, very high. I'm
thinking about our majors and the different platforms that each major use on I don't know if I'm speaking grammatically correctly in this, what they use in their industries just as a baseline to learn what those baseline technologies are for a journalism student, a publishing student, a VMA student, depending on what their specialty is. I'm thinking about, InDesign and, all the Adobe Creative Cloud, the different applications that they should be familiar with. And I'm sure they're using in the context of their studies. But to develop that on a deeper level, sort of like even take, whether it's a LinkedIn course or some online course or tutorial, just so that they can just dig deeper with the technology that is demanded of them in their majors. I'm thinking about, when I think about InDesign, for example, in publishing, that's like key right now. It's like one of the basics.
Oh yeah.
And so they might use it in a class, but to really be using it regularly and learning how to convert something to online publishing, for example, to know, all what that involves, because publishing for print, publishing for, online publications is two very different things. And so to be able to master that as much as you can when you're in an academic environment is huge.
My advice for they probably know this from experience too, but I always found the best way to learn how to use a new application, especially a specialty application like an InDesign or something, is have a project. Have a personal project that you say, I don't know how to use InDesign yet, but gosh darn it, I'm going to use InDesign to publish this book or to create this PDF or something like that. And it's, because of course you could take a LinkedIn Learning or a Skillshare course or something like that. And those are really handy. In my experience, they're probably the most handy for filling in gaps, for having some kind of foundational knowledge for it. So a good way to kind of cause yourself to ask questions or to seek out how to use those applications is to have a project in the first place. Right. You know, I think the same could be said of you know, like a home renovation project or something. Like I want to retile something. Well, how do you know, go along that road, and you start to, you know, look at YouTube videos and figure it out.
Yeah, it is it's kind of a DIY spirit, you know,
exactly.
To learn something yourself, develop yourself. And it's kind of like being aware of your own skill set as it is right now and looking at where you want to go. And, you know, there's sometimes when I speak with students on a career counseling level, is to look at job descriptions that require 3 to 5 years experience, even if they're looking at entry levels in the present, but to look at ones that are for more advanced positions to see what technologies are required of them at that level and be building towards them. Because they might not really have an awareness about what's expected 5 years from now, but if they start putting the roots down into the technology for that industry, then they'll be in better shape in the future.
You know, on the topic of experience, this is something that I had to learn through my career that, again, was not obvious when I was a student, which is professional certificates. I'm uncredentialed as far as a bachelor's degree goes in IT. And if you look around the IT world, you'll find lots of us. A lot of people went into something and they came out with an IT career. Of course, you know, Emerson remains central to my IT career because it started with my student job, and I was surrounded by people that actually wanted to help me and that could mentor me in the first place. So actually, I'm extremely grateful for my Emerson experience, despite you know, and I'm a filmmaker sort of by evening and weekend still. In many ways, my IT profession kind of affords that to me. But what I learned later, especially when I went into security, which is a little bit more of a kind of formalized, formally recognized career, you know, there's a distinct information security career path. It's infrequent that job listings require a degree in information security, but it's very frequent that they require a professional certificate. Sure. And not just any professional certificate. There are professional organizations that are kind of widely recognized. So in my case, it was there's an organization called ISC Squared that certifies information security professionals, and sort of the one for people in my position, which is information security officer. It's a management certificate, so it kind of qualifies that you're credentialed in the technology and in the management side, the risk management side. So it's called the CISSP. But I really recommend that people look into those even early in their career, because it not only is it an opportunity to have something else on your resume. So let's say that you have your bachelor's degree in one thing, and then you kind of want to bolster it with a specialty skill. You want to say, and also, look, I'm credentialed in this as well. That's a good idea for resumes, but it's also a good idea for the next 10 years, because you don't just get the certificate and that's it. You do continuing ed credits all along, and you end up belonging to a professional organization. Right. And by belonging to, you know, the perks of a professional organization is that there are people who work in that field, and that you can belong to listservs and you can get to know people, and you start to see the same names pop up over and over again. You see job listings, and when you're ready to take the next step in your career, you can get their next certificate, right? So you can show future employers that, like, yeah, I stuck with this professional organization. A lot of employers have professional development requirements. So in other words, they put aside a certain number of dollars per year to make sure that you're developing your skills. Good employers, you know, do that more than bad employers. And belonging to a professional organization just bakes that into the pie. You know, it's just part of your life, whether you're employed, unemployed, whatever. Yeah. You're always developing yourself, and belonging to a professional organization kind of makes sure that that's happening.
Yeah, I like the overlap in professional development and networking and mentorship. All those three things you mentioned go together when you continue to invest in yourself to develop your skills. Yes. And when you look for opportunities to grow, you actually create a network by connecting with people who provide those, you know, that educational tool, you know, in your own professional development.
What if you join a study group and now there's 3 or 4 of you who are all started at the same place. You were all trying to get your CISSP or whatever certificate is. So my advice would be, you know, start thinking about what field you might want to enter, or what your personality structure kind of you know, lends best to, and then research some widely recognized professional organizations that you can join. In the CISSP in my case, was a big certificate, but it was probably about 7 or 8 months of studying, and then it was an hour and a half test. So that was it. That's it's not you're not going back to school exactly. And they have apps where that you can quiz yourself every morning, 10 questions. Do I know, just to score yourself. Right. And I want to get back to that other one thing I just said as well, which is, again, when I started in tech, I didn't know that there was this thing called project management, or I didn't know that data center professionals didn't know how to hook up their keyboards. I didn't know how many different sects there were of the IT industry. And what I've learned through that is those particular specialties are less important than what your personality calls to. So when you're small, you think like, well, I'd like to be an artist, or I'd like to be something that's exciting, something that I already know about, something I already have a reference point for. But of course, when you're little, you don't know just how many jobs, so you don't know that if you're the kind of person that acts as social glue between two other people, two smart people who aren't talking, and you can lend value to that situation. You didn't know that you could actually be a project manager. A project manager in what? Any field, probably. Because the details are learnable. But the personality is is probably a less flexible attribute. So learn yourself, I suppose. If you're interviewing, for instance, they always at the end they give you 5 minutes to say, do you have any questions for us? And I would say ask, what's your gap here in terms of strengths and weaknesses? Because my strength, I've talked about my strengths, they're X, Y, and Z. How do you see those strengths fitting into your organization? What gaps do you have? That may give you a sense of whether or not you're a right fit for that place.
I want to land on one question that was kind of a theme for our Future Ready series, which is, what would you tell your college self about technology competency and success? If you could speak to the college version of yourself.
That all jobs are, at least all jobs that I would have been interested in. I suppose there are still some that don't touch technology, but very few. We would be hard pressed to think of any job that doesn't touch technology. So in that sense, I would regard all jobs as technology jobs. Again, there's no excusing yourself. But that said, I would tell myself it's all learnable. There's no magic knowledge that only some people have and you'll never have. It's especially in the information age. There's nothing that you can't research. There's nothing that you can't stumble around in the dark and try to understand and figure it out. And the great thing about asking questions, so don't be ashamed to ask questions. The great thing about asking, if you're in a group of people and you're all confused, but you don't know that you're all confused, in a classroom setting or in a job setting or something like that, you can be a hero by saying, I don't understand. Can you go back over that? And you're doing a service for the people around you. And if anybody thinks you're stupid, you're only stupid once. So now you move forward in the world smarter. I give that advice frequently because I think that things like complex technology come with self-consciousness, insecurity. They're going to think ill of me if I demonstrate that I don't know this. I can tell you, having worked with technologists now my whole career, they tend to be very objective thinkers. They work in reality. And so they would much rather have somebody say, I don't understand it, go back over this area. They'd much rather have that than somebody who's kind of faking their way through. Yeah. And it's now weeks later and they still don't quite understand.
I have to ask another question. I'm thinking about your VMA major background, and how do you keep up that part of yourself? And how are you both, a filmmaker and an IT professional in one? Like, how do you live out that part of your life?
And a dad.
Oh, yes.
It's hard. It's really hard. But I love filmmaking. It's not what I do, it's who I am. If somebody yanked filmmaking out of my life, I think that they would have halved me, So there's no saying goodbye to it, but I think it's figuring out what kinds of projects are tenable with a full-time schedule. But I've in the course of my time at Emerson, I've done a feature film, I've done a YouTube channel, I've there's at least with traditional office jobs, you do have your weekends and you do have your evenings.
Mhm.
And that means something. Of course, with IT, the computers don't sleep. So if there's an emergency, you have to jump on that after hours. Keeping collaborators who are, my family has always worked with me on this stuff, and I have close friends in the area who are always looking forward to the next project. So having people around you who want to do the next thing. But yeah, use well the minutes. Stay. I think it's like, when you're on like holiday break and it's just been too many days in a row of doing nothing and you start to feel kind of restless and uneasy. I think that creatively it's good to stay active so that you don't start to feel kind of like, oh, it's been too long since I've worked on something. There should always be a script being written. There should always be a shoot planned, just to keep alive.
Right. Sounds like be very intentional about it. Keep it
You
going.
have to be very intentional about it. Yep.
Awesome. Any last thoughts on the topic of technology and building skills? And
well, so I obviously enjoy talking about this topic. I feel like I went from knowing nothing to knowing a fair amount. And if anybody wants to ask me about any aspect of technology careers or how I went from Emerson to this or anything like that, they can email me. It's Francis, FRANCIS _Frain, FRAIN @emerson.edu.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Frankie.
Thank you.